16 unsolved mysteries, shrouded in darkness for years, are brought to light by unexpected clues. Discover how seemingly insignificant details, overlooked by investigators, ultimately cracked the cases and delivered long-awaited justice. Sometimes, the smallest details, a mosquito bite, a speck of glitter, or a forgotten receipt, can unravel the most perplexing mysteries. In this video, we'll explore how these seemingly insignificant clues helped solve cold cases that had baffled investigators for years. These stories remind us that no detail is too small when it comes to seeking justice. Let's dive into these fascinating cases. Case 1. The glitter that sparked justice. In 2001, 16-year-old Leanne Tiernan disappeared while walking home from a shopping trip in Leeds, England. Her body was discovered months later, buried in a shallow grave in a wooded area. The case baffled investigators, as there were no immediate suspects or witnesses. The community was left in fear, and the investigation stalled. A tiny speck of glitter found on Leanne's body became the key to solving the case. Investigators traced the glitter to a specific type of Christmas decorations sold in a local store. This led them to John Taylor, a delivery driver who had purchased the same decorations. Additionally, dog hairs found on Leanne's scarf matched Taylor's pet, further linking him to the crime. John Taylor was arrested, and DNA evidence confirmed his involvement in Leanne's murder. He was convicted in 2002 and sentenced to life in prison. The glitter, a seemingly insignificant detail, had cracked the case wide open and brought justice to Leanne's family. Case 2. The mosquito that solved a car theft. 2008, Finnish police were investigating a stolen car that had been abandoned. The case initially had no leads, as there were no witnesses or obvious evidence left behind in the vehicle. While examining the car, investigators noticed a squashed mosquito on the interior. They decided to collect the mosquito and test the blood it had consumed. The DNA evidence from the mosquito led to the identification and arrest of the suspect. This case is often cited as an example of how even the smallest and most unexpected details can help solve crimes. It also highlights the innovative use of forensic science in criminal investigations. Case 3. The napkin that solved a 1993 murder. In 1993, Jeannie Ann Childs was brutally murdered in her apartment in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The case went cold for decades, as investigators had no leads aside from DNA evidence collected at the crime scene. At the time, there was no match for the DNA in police databases. In 2018, the FBI reopened the case and used genetic genealogy to analyze the preserved DNA. This technique narrowed the suspect pool to 2 individuals, one of whom was Jerry Westrom. Investigators followed Westrom to a hockey game and collected a napkin he discarded after eating a hot dog. DNA from the napkin matched the DNA found at the crime scene. Jerry Westrom was arrested and charged with Jeannie Ann Childs' murder. He was later convicted, bringing long-awaited justice to the victim's family. This case is a prime example of how tiny pieces of evidence, combined with advances in forensic technology, can solve decades-old crime. Case 4. The dog hair that solved a murder. In 1998, Elizabeth Ballard was found murdered and buried in a shallow desert grave in New Mexico. The perpetrators had meticulously wrapped her body in plastic, scrubbed the crime scene, and cleaned the car used to transport her remains. Despite their efforts to erase all traces of the crime, investigators initially struggled to identify suspects or gather conclusive evidence, until a nearly invisible clue emerged. While analyzing trace evidence from Ballard's clothing, forensic examiners discovered a single dog hair clinging to one of her socks. Crucially, the hair retained a root containing intact DNA. Investigators sent the sample to experts specializing in animal genetics, who traced it to a specific dog, a reddish-brown pit bull mix named Hercules. This breakthrough shifted the case into high gear, as authorities now had a biological link to track down the killer. Hercules' DNA led police to his owner, a man who had denied any connection to Ballard or the crime. Forensic scientists matched the hair to the dog, proving the victim had been inside the suspect's home, directly contradicting his alibi. Further investigation revealed the owner, Charles Martinez, had conspired with his partner, Christopher Faviel, to kill Ballard after a personal dispute. The dog hair evidence, combined with witness testimony, secured their convictions. This case became a landmark in forensic science, demonstrating how animal DNA could crack seemingly unsolvable crimes. It spurred the use of pet genetics in investigations nationwide, from matching dog blood in a Seattle double homicide to analysing urine in an Iowa assault. Case 5. the flakes of pink paint that exposed a child killer. In 1984, 8-year-old Vicky Lynn Hoskinson vanished while riding her bike near her Tucson, Arizona home. Her bicycle was found abandoned, but despite an exhaustive search, no trace of Vicky emerged for months, until her remains were discovered in the desert. Investigators faced a chilling dead end. No witnesses, no clear suspects, and a community gripped by fear. In a case that seemed destined to go cold, detectives stumbled on a clue hidden in plain sight: microscopic flecks of pink paint clinging to Vicky's bicycle. But this wasn't just any paint. It matched a rare two-tone design on a 1976 Dodge Dart Sport, turquoise with pink racing stripes. Then came the bombshells. The car's undercarriage was dented exactly like the bike's pedal. Nickel traces from the bumper were embedded in the metal. Even a dent in a mailbox post, 12 inches high, aligned with the car's bumper, like a silent witness to a slow-motion collision. No DNA, no fingerprints, just a killer's car leaving invisible fingerprints all over the crime. This forensic puzzle pinned the unthinkable on Frank Jarvis Atwood, a paroled child predator who thought he'd outsmarted justice. His car became his downfall. The paint, the damage, the mailbox dent, all weaving a story he couldn't escape. In 2022, after 38 years on death row, he was executed. Proof that even the tiniest traces outlive a killer's arrogance. But the real twist? This case rewrote the rules. It turned paint chips into a smoking gun, inspired laws to protect missing kids, and proved science could crack cold cases without a single strand of DNA. Case 6. The Lego brick that solved a 23-year-old murder. In 1991, 78-year-old Lucille Johnson was found brutally murdered in her holiday home. The beloved grandmother, known for her kindness to neighbours, had been beaten, strangled, and left with 24 broken ribs. Despite collecting evidence like scattered Lego bricks and missing jewellery, investigators hit a dead end. For 23 years, the case grew colder, leaving her family and community haunted by unanswered questions. Decades later, a federal cold case grant breathed new life into the investigation. Detectives re-examined scrapings from under Lucille's fingernails, uncovering DNA that matched John Sansing, a death row inmate in Arizona for a nearly identical murder. But the clincher? Tiny fingerprints on Lego blocks at the scene belonged to Sansing's 5-year-old son, placing them both in Lucille's home. A final twist came when Sansing's own wife threatened to expose him, snarling, "I'll tell them you killed that lady in Utah." The DNA and Lego evidence pinned Sansing to the crime, leading to his 2014 murder charge. Though already sentenced to death for another killing, the breakthrough gave Lucille's family long-awaited answers. Case 7. The cigarette butt that found a serial predator. For over a decade, a masked predator terrorized Lafayette Parish, Louisiana, targeting vulnerable women in their homes. The serial rapist, clad in a ski mask and gloves, struck under cover of darkness, leaving no fingerprints or clear witnesses. Despite DNA evidence collected from victims, the crimes went unsolved for 13 years, largely because the perpetrator was hiding in plain sight. Randy Como, a veteran Lafayette Parish Sheriff's deputy with 20 years on the force, used his law enforcement expertise to evade detection, even participating in investigations of his own crimes. The key to unmasking the predator lay in his smoking habit. At multiple crime scenes, investigators found discarded cigarette butts that seemed out of place. Though the rapist wore gloves, the butts contained traces of saliva with epithelial cells. DNA extracted from the saliva matched a profile in the system, but it didn't belong to a known criminal. Instead, it pointed to Como, whose DNA had been logged as part of routine law enforcement protocols. His downfall exposed chilling details. He stalked women he encountered through his job, often targeting those living in high crime areas, knowing they'd be less likely to report assaults. The cigarette butts, once overlooked as random trash, became the smoking gun that shattered his double life. Como pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 80 years in prison. The case sparked outrage over institutional trust, leading to reforms in Louisiana's DNA collection policies for law enforcement. For survivors, the resolution brought a fractured sense of justice. History proves that even the most overlooked evidence can become a killer's undoing. These cases remind us that justice often hides in the tiniest details: a fleck of paint, a strand of pet hair, or a speck of DNA. Criminals may bury their secrets, but science and persistence always dig deeper. Stay tuned for part 2, where we unravel how a single horsehair and a contact lens container exposed killers who thought they'd gotten away with murder.